Hello people. That time of year when I present our annual results to you, a bit like a shareholder report. I do it every year, as you know, and this year I want to take you through our results from when we started in 2017 through to 2020. I'll then give you an update on our business model, how we see it shaping up, and how we're going to use that to drive business value. Okay. Let's have a look at our results so far, starting with 2017. As you can see from the slide, 2017, our first year of operation, our written was 2.7 and we issued 2.3. Followed that with a good year in 2018 when we're really starting to get our feet under the table in motor with a year-end written of 3.6 million and year-end issued of 3 million. Now, in fact, that's probably flattering us a little on the written because we know that that figure for written contained a large amount of pipeline business that was actually never going to issue. So you can see in our projected results to December 2019, we've actually taken that out, knocked it on the head. So our written in 2019, projected written, dropped a little to what we were expecting to do would be 3.2 million. We put these figures together around about November time. And we were also predicting an issued income of 2.7 million. So we're now past the year end and we know what the real figures were, and we came in on 3.3 million written, slightly higher than we were predicting, and year end income was 2.95. Now, I presented this slide up in Birmingham the other week when I said it was 2.7, but we've had an update on the figures and it turns out that we were actually pretty much bang on what we did last full year 2018, which was 3 million issued. So considering that during the course of the year we spent 4 months moving office and setting up new administration staff, and it's a year when our mortgage market was relatively flat. There wasn't a great deal of growth, and as I've probably said to you before, and you all know, real mortgage lending volumes are still half of what they were pre-credit crunch. As a board, we think that's a pretty magnificent result. I have to say we're really quite pleased to have managed to achieve that. However, doesn't mean we're complacent. We really still want to move the business forward dramatically. But let's just look in a little bit more detail. And again, same as I did last year, I'm looking at lending fee and protection volumes for 17, 18 and 19. If you look at broker and conveyancing fees in 17, we did 122k, and that was our first full year of really charging for our services properly, and the first time we'd had a link with conveyancing so we could earn there. And if you look at how that's progressed through consistently through 18 and 19, we're now up to 239k at the end of this year, which is a nice progression. You know, it's moving forward well. I think there's still some of you out there who haven't really got to grips with charging broker fees, and I think you need to do so because our job's complex and the need to understand the criteria of so many different lenders is blooming hard work, and you should charge for that skill. Lending volumes, again, climbing quite nicely, starting at 351 million in our first full year to 448 million in 28 and 488 million at the end of 2019, best part of $500 million. So again, nice steady protection, a nice steady move forward, particularly when you consider we've not really increased the headcount dramatically during some of that period of time. And in 2019, recruitment was definitely hampered for 4 months whilst we were moving office. It had a distinct impact. Quite a lot of change in terms of our skill set and our abilities, and I think that's really why lending volumes have increased. And you can see the same goes for protection. 121 million in 2017, 126, a little increase in 18, and up to nearly 140 million in 2019 year end. Pretty good. I mean, if we dive down into that and do a little bit of analysis, what we're actually seeing is that those advisors who've been with us over a year, but less than 2 years, are actually getting quite high conversion rates on mortgage cases to protection cases now, with some of them doing over 100% of protection. So that's quite a result. Our average protection across the whole of the company is now about a 50% conversion rate on cases. So again, definitely moving in the right direction. More to do, of course, and still not everybody tackles protection. And as you know, we consider it almost a dereliction of duty if we don't do so, putting people in debt and not giving them the wherewithal to get out of debt if circumstances change and there's a bit of a bump in the road in their life. So still room to progress there, and we will continue to concentrate on protection training during the course of 2020. This year I'm also going to talk about profits. Now, I've not put this slide up before, but it's becoming a nice positive story. So when we started in January 2017, we were a loss-making business from day one. In fact, the advisors who came on board at that time were making a loss of about 90k. And so our end of 2017, our losses, and remember our year end is the end of May, 31st of May, as you can see. We were probably in our first year, brought that down to about a 30k loss. Did about the same in May 2018, round about 30k. Same to May 19, so pretty consistent losses over our first full years. However, when we put our figures together for these slides, November 2019, as we expected, we're starting to show a profit, and we're projecting that by May the 31st of 2020, we'll be showing a 150k profit, which is a nice step in the right direction. So well done. Headcount, always important. We started with, we say 60 advisors. In reality, it was probably nearer to 54 because even when we started, there were a few who were on the way out the door. We got up to 75 advisors in 2018, and we were looking to finish at 90 advisors by the end of the year. In actual fact, we're probably going to finish, well, certainly by the end of January, we'll be up to about 106 advisors, give or take, which is actually quite a result. We're ahead of where we expected to be. And as you know, our target for year-end 2020 was 200 consultants across the UK. And you see the little note by the side, it assumes recruitment of businesses. And if you look at where we're anticipating ending up by the year-end 2020, we're looking at 280 advisors. And that note's telling you that we're in conversations over strategic alliances initially leading to mergers. 4 businesses, we're in due diligence conversations now, which would take our turnover to nearly 10 million, and 280 advisors, which makes us a sizable firm. And I think it's a timely reminder to say, think big. Our profession has a tendency to look and behave like a cottage industry. There's not very many big players out there, and there's not many firms that think big. So we can look at that and say, oh, that's a result, 280 advisors. If we achieve that by the end of the year, that's fantastic. Just between you and I, if we can get to 1,000 advisors by the end of the year, that would be a bit better, wouldn't it? And there's a serious chance of achieving that. Because as I say, there's not that many ambitious firms out there. But if you can push the right buttons and find the right firms that have got enough consultants, you can excite them with the prospect of moving towards a capital event, specifically a flotation on AIM, which, as you know, has always been our goal. And I spoke to a firm the other day, they're 600 plus advisors. So if we can get them on board as well, we'll be looking at 900 advisors across the UK. Not saying we will, because you can't bring every deal to the table that you first start conversations around. But if we could, wouldn't that be exciting? And if you remember, Mortgage Advice Bureau floated with 600 advisors for 84 million in November 2014. So if we can get to 900 advisors ready for a flotation, and that would certainly accelerate the timescape table, think how exciting that could be. I'm not saying the same will happen, but who knows? Possibilities are endless. The key is being ambitious. And I'd encourage you to be ambitious in your business plans for this year. Don't think about doing the same as last year. Think about doubling it, tripling it. Why not? You're skillful, you're aware of the marketplace, you've got a great proposition. So don't lack ambition. Really push yourself to achieve the most you possibly can. And as we've often said, if you set the bar really high, really, really high, you might be surprised how high you can get. Even if you don't get quite there, you could still be a lot further than you ever expected to be. So don't be cautious, be brave. Really look to grow your business this coming year. So let's give you a quick reminder of the CDMB plan for 2019 to 2021. As you know, originally we were looking to get to 200 productive advisors. That's always been our aim. We don't want to carry people. We want everybody to be contributing to the profit of the company and making a good living themselves. Ready for an IPO on AIM by the end of 2020. It's not saying we IPO at the end of 2020. It says we want to be ready to do so with a profit margin of 10 to 14%, which we're not there yet. If we achieve 150k profit, it'll still only be about 5%. So there's still room to move that forward. If we look at, excuse me, if we look at our current structure, 2019, as you know, we're an AR of Quilter. If we just cast our mind back and remember what CDG looked like, remember they sold in February to Quilter, which was Intrinsic, and that's where they were in January 2019. An AR of Intrinsic Financial Services, which was the directly regulated body reporting to the FCA. CDG was an AR, and ownership of that business sat with Charles Darby Group. So what happened in February 2019, CDG sold to Intrinsic Financial Services, and what that means in reality is ownership moved, that's all. The business continued exactly as it was. Ownership had switched to Intrinsic Financial Services. That was the change. So from an advice point of view, it was negligible difference. And curious enough, just this last weekend, the rebrand of CDG has now happened. So at this point in time, we are the only Charles Darby in existence because the old Charles Darby Group is now Quilter Financial Advisors. So here's Charles Darby Mortgage Bureau. Pretty much the same, 2019. FCA is still the regulated body which Quilter Financial Services reports into, and Charles Darby Mortgage Bureau is an AR, and ownership sits with Charles Darby Mortgage Bureau. But we don't want to do quite the same as Charles Darby Group because we're aiming for an IPO on AIM, and that's because I believe, I may be wrong, that a trade sale for us is less likely that as a mortgage and protection business than it was for a wealth business. So we've come up with a slightly different model, and part of this was, and I might have explained this to some of you before, some of this was my learning experience as a result of the sale of CDG. You know, what we did was we created a peer group of similar firms which we merged, which became the foundation of Charles Darby Group, which then went from strength to strength in terms of its scale and funds under management, and gradually, as we all know, moved towards being purely a wealth business. What we did when we brought those firms together was merged firms that were all ARs of Intrinsic, now Quilter. It didn't occur to us at the time that there is a distinct difference between regulation and ownership. And what this slide is showing you is that we are separating regulation and ownership so that we can have differently regulated bodies under the same ownership structure. So we're using the term just loosely of a mortgage conglomerate. It's not a term we particularly like, but it serves a purpose. And we're looking at an unregulated holding company, which is what Charles Darby Group was. And well, for now, let's call it 2 Financial. What its final name will be is yet to be determined. But under there, you can see on the left-hand side of the slide, there's Charles Darby Mortgage Bureau, who's an AR of Quilter Financial Services and Quilter Mortgage Planning. But also, alongside, are directly authorised businesses, multiple businesses, because there's loads of little, 2, 3, 4-man businesses in the UK who are directly authorised by the FCA, but have got absolutely not a cat in hell's chance of realising a capital event in the future. And that needs scale. And one of the things this structure will provide is scale. But they don't have to change their regulatory status, as neither does CDMB. We can remain an AR of Quilter, and they can remain directly authorised by the FCA. Equally, it's possible for ARs of other networks to join this structure. So you could take an AR from MAB, for example, the Mortgage Advice Bureau, and they could fall ownership-wise under the same structure as Charles Darby Mortgage Bureau and the directly authorised businesses, i.e. become part of 2 Financial from an ownership point of view, but not from a regulated point of view. And if you can do all that, well, then you can also bring small networks on board, maybe even big networks. I'm saying don't lack ambition, and I certainly think as a board we do not lack ambition. We're incredibly ambitious for what we want to achieve. So small to medium to large networks can potentially come under this framework as well. There's questions to be answered. Will another network permit one of their firms? Will a network such as MAB allow one of their firms to join another holding company? But you have to ask yourself, why wouldn't they? If a firm wants to find a route to capital and they can't get it in their current network, they're going to leave. Well, if we give them a route to capital and they can stay there, that's a bit of a win-win, isn't it? So I think enlightened business people will see this as beneficial, not as a threat. Egos will be a big factor, because one of the things here, and let's pop across to the next slide, is ownership. That's what we're talking about here. Where does ownership sit when you go into this structure? And the answer is it has to move. So you're a directly authorised business, or you're an AR of another network, or you're CDMB, or you're a small network. The people who run those are used to making their own decisions all of the time. And what they've got to do is move their ownership, once they're settled, to the holding company. Not 51%. In reality, it's 100%. And that's a big step. But I tell you what, everybody I talk to has the same goal. How do I realise the value of my business? And unless you've got scale, they're never going to. So when I take this model out and I explain it to people, it's amazing the response I get. Nobody turns around and goes, well, daft idea, I'm not doing that. In fact, they're all going, oh, that's interesting. Hadn't thought of that. And the reason they hadn't thought of it, because nobody has. Nobody's done what we're proposing here. And so it really does rapidly gain tractions, which is why we're in due diligence conversations with 4 firms who want to merge. One's a directly authorised firm. There's us, who's an AR. There's another firm that's an AR of a different network. As it happens, they are coming to join us, but they are initially an AR of another network. And there's also, one of them is a small network. So it's quite exciting, really. And I think it's got a long way to run yet. So I hope you agree with me. That all sounds like an exciting future. And reflect that in your own personal business planning. Think big, like we do, and you'll benefit as a result, because very few people do. Thanks for your time. Thanks for listening.